Well, good evening, everybody. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's Thursday night, so that means it's TNT, an explosive show here tonight with the Thursday night trio, George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. Good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, John. I'm going to be spanking the ferret today.
Well,
the Fusilier-friendly ferret.
The Erasmus Lab is so happy that one didn't die in the breathing chamber from the latest COVID incarnation. So, I guess Freddie the ferret didn't make it.
Yes,
he should have worn a mask.
Frozen ferret on a stick.
Yeah,
everybody's family fun treat, like popcorn. Well, George, I have some good news today. I'm feeling very warm towards our mutual friend, Igor Kolomoisky, our Ukrainian friend. And he has triple. Yeah, there you go. He has not just one, but not two, but three types of national citizenship: Cyprus, Israel, and the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And, the Ukraine says, it's against the law to have dual citizen. They forbid it. And I think, Aaron, check me if I'm wrong on my Yiddish here, but he's got the chutzpah. He says, well, I'm not a dual citizen. I'm a triple citizen.
Yeah. he's right there.
He knows how to game the system. But the reason why I'm feeling so warm towards my friend Igor Kolomoisky is that, I'm trying to get in the head of the Ukrainian people, right? I'm going down to the Sabbatean, Frankist, all that material. But, I felt, and I've always been meaning to get to this great literary mind, this figure, Isaac Babel, who, by the way, died in 1940 in one of the Stalin's gulags, just as we're being rounded up in our own little bio-corporate gulags. Isaac Babel sacrificed himself, his art, to totalitarianism, just like we're sacrificing ourselves to bio-totalitarianism. But anyway, he writes, so I'm reading about Odessa and, the Jewish community. And, it was all, I think, written in Yiddish. I think he was the first one to write in Russian, so far as the Jewish community is concerned. And the very first, this is a really good essay, by the way, by Boris Dialyuk about, Isaac Babel in his favorite city, Odessa. This is, I know Kolomoisky was not from Odessa, but he looms in this little story right here. He looms large because in this story, this collection of short stories by Babel, there's this Ukrainian gangster. See, I'm trying to get into the whole gangster mindset, right? I'm trying to understand this so that we can one day, as fellow makers, another Yiddish word, we can have a sit down and negotiate, amongst equals. So I'm trying to get in the headspace of the gangsters. And there's this fictional gangster in the very first story. His name's Benya Krik, of Odessa. And the story is called The King because he's the king of Odessa. And it's modeled after a real kingpin back in the 1920s. And according to the footnotes here, the endnotes, it's about a little a neighborhood called Moldavanka in Odessa, where Babel was born. He was born there and he was raised there. But anyway, one of the legendary gangsters of that town was a guy named Moishe Yakov Volvanich Vinitsky. And his alias was, guess what? And this is why I feel so warm and fuzzy towards Kolomoisky. His alias was Mishka Yaponchik. Just like I am the Japanese-American David Icke, Misha Yaponchik, his nickname, this kingpin, real historical figure, that means Misha the Jap. 1891. And this is after the Russo-Japanese War, where the Tsar got his ass handed to him by the first non-European nation ever in world history. So they were feeling like, hey, those are our people, man. They kicked ass, and we hate the Tsar. So he took on the name of Mishka the Jap. But anyway, here's where our friend Kolomoisky comes in. Kolomoisky, this is from his Wikipedia, ladies and gentlemen. You can check it out. Kolomoisky uses the nickname Benya which is the invocation of the infamous Ukrainian and Jewish criminal reprobate Benya Klik, popularized, fictionalized in Isaac Babel's Odessa Tales, 1948. So, ladies and gentlemen, fiction is real. So there's a connection.
That reminds me immediately of the Odessa file. And the Odessa file was put together by these cooperative, collaborating Jews that did work the death camps. And they were the front men for organizing the escape of all these Nazis in Reinhard Gellen's organization, both East and West. And you just have to wonder if when the two files go in the two different directions there in Odessa, it's easy to get to Russia from there. It's only like a 50-mile drive, and Crimea at that time belonged to Russia, so you could get in that way. But is this the Perm Index going the other way? Getting in through Greece or going in through the Black Sea, Turkey, etc. And does that become the McDuff file? Does that become the McDuff file? Because we now have information from Andrea Shea King that there was about 1,000 people that J. Edgar Hoover knew about, but there was all these extra people Reinhard Gellen and the CIA wanted to get in. And where would they have come through to get their passports and secret papers? Odessa was passport central. Just ask Igor Kolomoisky, our little Binya.
Yes, he's the criminal mastermind, but there was also a heavy Ukrainian / Russian presence in Hankou in China during the war, before the war, during the war. And by the way, Soviet pilots were fighting on the part of the nationalist troops. They were helping them before the war broke out, the East Asian War. But so there's a large Ukrainian / Kievan Russian community in places like Nanjing, right? And this is where the McDuff file also emerges with a piece of research that Kathy Sue turned me on to. I'm sorry, I have Kathy X, or I'm sorry, that's what your name. And this is what I was talking about last time with the Black Dahlia killer. This guy here named George Hodel. He very well might have crossed paths with Thomas O'Loughlin. This guy here was, according to this book that he wrote himself, Dr. Hodel, he was the chief regional medical officer for the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Agency in 1946. And shortly upon his return, then this is where these exsanguinated bodies started turning up in Los Angeles. And I gave you my whole theory behind that in a different talk. So this really kind of fits in with this use of, let's say, United Nations humanitarian, quote unquote, efforts. And I'm sure they're helping some people on some level. But as you pointed out, George, before, the whole sword and shield concept, or the sort of the manifold or the dual fold purpose of these efforts, there's always a dark side of it. And this guy here, Hodel, was more than the Black Dahlia killer, according to the literature here. He was a large-scale operative, exfiltrator, and I think when all is said and done, when all the research is done, because of the door that I'm opening here, he's more than a serial killer. This guy might take the title of the American Dr. Josef Mengele, George Hodel. That's my contribution. Thanks to the combined efforts of the Team W Osprey World Research Network.
Well, I really like that. John, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
No. John, you got to pick this up. I'm sure you're going to.
And you mentioned last week, and I have not.
Okay.
I've been really immersed in the Pacific War with MacArthur down there, and Halsey, and all of the great warriors. So been making progress with the book, and the trouble is, of course, as you know, as authors, both of you, that as soon as you start writing something, and then you say, oh, I want to look that up. And then you go and you do a little bit more research, and you say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not ready to write this yet. I better look at this and this and this. So I got 2 new Douglas MacArthur books in the mail today. And so I am just really deep into that right now. It's fascinating stuff, and I've been getting a lot of great help from Jim Zobel at the MacArthur Memorial Museum down in Norfolk. There's a tremendous amount of fascinating material. So forgive me for that one, but I will check into Mr. Hodel.
Well, let's transition to that, because John, you make a great point, because if you go back to your instincts, this is before you knew, had gone through all your notes and you knew about the meeting between Donovan and MacArthur. You didn't know that meeting had occurred, right? You had an instinct, right, that there was some kind of East Coast elite play for the drugs to go into China and the Asia. And you were thinking MacArthur's resisting this thing, and Donovan saying, "Oh, let's put the guys in there," and MacArthur saying, "If they report to me, you could put the guys in there, but if they don't, you ain't coming in." And look how all the research now is supporting that, and you're finding facts and notes to support that. That's really amazing.
Now, John, there's a series, as you found out, there's a series of eureka moments that really, get you hyped up and going. I mean, that's kind of like the psychic payoff you get. Could you describe one of them, one such scenario like that, at least one? Could you share with us some connection that you made?
Well, it's interesting. I've been studying the relationship between General MacArthur and the rest of the American command. And it's true that he was running his own show, and he did not want them to be interfering with what he was doing, even when OSS says, hey, we've got all of these scientists, we can figure out, how secure the sand is on your beaches before you have to try to take them, and we can do lots of great stuff for you, plus psychological warfare. And he says, no, I'll handle that myself. And that to me defines the old style of a warrior. I mean, he really is the classic, and maybe even the last of the old style of a general that just wants to be in charge of everything. Whereas you contrast that with a guy like Donovan, who is enamored with the idea of cloak and dagger and getting things done by secret things that are going to ultimately save lives, save thousands and thousands of lives by using assassination or poison or, you name it. I mean, shooting down planes, that type of dirty things that Alan Dulles called fun and games has now become the weapon of choice for the last 50, 60 years. And I see that William Donovan he didn't have the bad motivation of an Alan Dulles. Alan Dulles was working for Wall Street, the white shoe law firm guy, and that was his motivation. And this is where I think your book, Servitors of Empire, is so informative, because what you said about Asians and their experience in integrating into American culture, society, and especially in employment and business, I saw it immediately in my father's life. In that this was, and George Webb is the one that first said that he turned down the white shoe law firm. That's exactly what it is. It's the white shoe law firm. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as I was just reading from some of the EIRs that I read, the Executive Employment Intelligence Review, EIRs from the LaRouche organization, and Lyndon LaRouche did a pretty good study on that question, and said that Donovan was much more of a patriotic guy like MacArthur than any of those white shoe New England or the Stanford types, mm-hmm. which they referred to kind of very disparagingly as the white shoe division of the CIA. And that, unfortunately, was that's who won. They just took over and pushed everybody out. And so they pushed William Donovan out, and Donovan was out even before MacArthur was pushed out by Truman in 51. So that was new to me, to think that it's never as simple as you think it is. I was looking at it, 2 days ago as MacArthur versus Donovan, and Donovan is like the message, the errand boy for the East Coast establishment. But no, he came up from a different background. Yeah. And, so we have to be careful when we try to make generalizations. I am very interested in George Marshall now in his role, because I have often cast him as a villain in the sense that he, again, was one of those military guys that supported the East Coast establishment, but he wasn't one of them. He was he was a teacher from VMI, but MacArthur and Marshall had in common a great deal of experience in World War I, from which they knew that they could rely on each other, even in cases where they disagreed with each other. I don't know. The big thing that kind of blowing my mind is how all of the leaders in the American effort in World War II were, in a sense, kind of prima donnas, but also, in a sense, patriots, to the extent that they were never going to let their own prima donna personalities dominate in their decision making. That was always, what is the best for the United States, and that type of patriotism is what has been eaten away by the agents of the White Shoe faction that's taken over all of our intelligence agencies. I'm sad to say that's my opinion. I could be wrong.
John, that is a great prologue to your book right there. It's right there. That's the preface right there.
Well, and I didn't want to leave Donovan in the lurch there. I believe that MacArthur recognized Donovan for bravery in his army unit in World War I. So these guys definitely knew each other, and I don't think MacArthur was a direct supervisor of Donovan, but Donovan was a guy who would jump out of planes and do some crazy things, and he was an admirable guy, and he wasn't the pipe smoking, lurking guy in the background wondering what the next poison was going to be. As much as Dulles and Angleton, those guys were really and Bissell, they were looking for the next dart gun with the next sea serpent poison all the time. But Donovan was more of a jump out of the plane kind of guy behind enemy lines and blow up a bridge and all that sort of thing.
Donovan was a half a generation older than Mr. O'Loughlin, but he was also Irish American, and he came up the hard way. And he also was dangled the possibility of entering to the White Shoe establishment, because people today don't realize that the level of discrimination, social discrimination that Irish Catholic Americans were experiencing back then, even down to the campaign of John F. Kennedy. And so he came up that way, and the Rockefellers, because he was a Rockefeller guy in particular, kept on saying, you're just a Mick, we're going to let you in if you do this and this for us. And what the heroism of Mr. O'Loughlin, Thomas F. O'Loughlin, is that he had his whole career charted out for him. He could have followed that trajectory all the way from prep school to law school, through military service, and then through government service. But he said, no. He said, that takes a lot of bravery. He could have, had it on easy street, but he said, no, I'm an American.
Yeah, he always said that the only thing he ever said that he wanted to do would be to help people that were less fortunate than himself. And that's not the type of mindset that they're looking for in the White Shoe law firms.
Yeah, it's quite the opposite. They want to see they're going to test you out, when you're going through the different degrees of initiation, and I've been through it. I don't know how I didn't get up to the 30th degree, but I've been through the steps, but they're always checking you out. They're always evaluating to see if you're one of the sleaze bags that they're going to need to execute their little schemes.
One other thing that I learned today, which early this morning as I was doing some research, was J. Edgar Hoover, and the fact that he not only was he opposed to the CIA's being created in 1947, and not only was he, fighting against the CIA for territory and control over agents, assets, and all kinds of just that, but go back into the very beginning of the dispute, OSS during World War II. Hoover had created a study of the OSS's activities in World War II and was a great enemy of Donovan. His study showed that the OSS's activities, the great cloak and dagger things, were ineffective at best, that caused soldiers to die, and that mistakes were made, that real huge blunders were made. And this report, I can't remember the man's name, it's like Hill or Hell or something, that wrote this report, was completely, absolutely devastating to Donovan. So that is really enlightening to me, that Hoover was even during the war, but at the end of the war in particular, when the question was arising, will we create a post-war intelligence agency as Donovan wants us to, and that Hoover was absolutely already, for 5 years by then, completely opposed to Donovan, and there you go. That's that whole, the traditional patriotism versus the white shoe East Coast elites. It comes out again when you realize that Hoover, so you've got my father in alignment with MacArthur, and then you've got my father in alignment with Hoover. And it's clear that what I think, really has happened is that my dad sees that this OSS white shoe crowd not only is not people that he wants to work for, but it's people that are dangerous to the country. And he has to commit himself to the FBI side of it in order to be effective, to try to resolve and get rid of this terrible imposition on our civil government.
John, and listening to your readings and your observations and your conversation, your dialogue, especially with George Webb, you forced me to reevaluate entirely my whole understanding of who J. Edgar Hoover was and what the FBI was. Because I read this book, very influential, called American Caesar by Anthony Summers, and it talks about all across, all the sensational stuff, right? And so I thought he was horrible. And of course, during the 60s, we heard about, COINTELPRO and all that. And he wasn't an angel, but he was a guy who was in charge of security and intelligence, right? So, so I understand that, and I respect that, and the necessity of it. But you forced me to reevaluate J. Edgar Hoover, and I started thinking about it. I realized, who was the only federal level person of his stature that was against, on the record, the internment of 120,000 American citizens of Japanese descent? It was J. Edgar Hoover. Who were the people who wanted it? It was the White Shoe Boys, who by that time controlled the military and created this whole Western, quote unquote, defense region where they can start workshopping the incarceration of civilian populations, and they put the social scientists in there to study them so that they can use that plot and roll it out January 6, 2021. So that was J. Edgar Hoover. John, I am chastened. I have now been historiographically enlightened by your contribution. Thank you very much.
Well, guys, I've been watching the chat, and that's one thing. The reason why I'm doing not there with John tonight is because I can read the chat because I can get my eyes like 2 inches from the screen. But a lot of people are asking about the white shoe comment, and I think sometimes we do, just assume everybody knows this. But there was a certain style of Oxford shoe that was around, in the late 1800s that was white. And a lot of the prep kids from Yale and Harvard and Columbia, the smart set, wore those to the summer galas. And it just became known as white shoe law firms if you've been around a long time. And it was Sullivan and Cromwell and all these things that we've, these institutions that seem to spawn OSS and CIA guys. And white shoe law firm in particular is a colloquial expression going back to these founding law firms on Wall Street when it was just kind of taking off. You have the various secret societies all getting together and so forth. And so anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yes, think F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah, F. Scott Fitzgerald out there at Little Egg and West Egg and East Egg. Yeah. Fictitious.
Exactly. He understood what it was because, again, he was another outsider, right? Who was at Yale. He was a scholarship kid, and he was way out of his, not out of his depth. He was a brilliant guy, but he knew that was not his world. So what did he do? He wrote about it, and he left that legacy. And I think it's him that kind of put that term and that concept into the language, the White Shoe Boys. Yeah,
and I think The Great Gatsby is one of the great books that every young person should read before they think they're going to go out east and be accepted for all their great achievements. No matter what you do, the lesson of Great Gatsby is you'll never be accepted. You're not one of us. So, and that is kind of the same story of Tom OLoughlin. If you think about it, he's the adopted son that they never had, but he fights it. It's a great story. It's a great story.
John, what are the morsels?
I had a great idea, and I'm listening to George. But I tell you what, I got a question. Here's something I just want to bounce off of you guys. It's a serious question, and I've been thinking about it ever since I talked to Helga Zepp-LaRouche yesterday, which was such a thrill for me. And I got so much out of it. And she's a great lady and really gracious to talk to. I appreciate it very much. And all the folks at Schiller Institute, really good people. But I thought we had a very significant difference of opinion. That was that to her, and I think to a lot of her colleagues, that we are getting very close to a potential nuclear exchange, which they project would not be survivable by mankind. That once if somebody pulls the trigger on a nuke, and the rest of humanity it'll just be impossible to stop, and we'll all be wiped out. And that is to them the most urgent, thing facing mankind. I said I disagree. To me, the most urgent thing facing us right now is biological warfare, and that's what I've been spending a lot of time studying on my channel. And I found that that's an amazing difference to me, because I don't think that it's really on their radar screen. From what I could tell, that it's not something that the three of us, we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. And, to have a significant institution like that to say, well, no, we're not really looking at that. That points to me an amazing, I would say, opportunity to exercise, reason and to look for opportunities to work together across things like that, because we have so much in common. And this trying to get rid of this this white shoe law firm driven blob of Wall Street control or City of London control. I mean, we all are on board with that. Trying to consider how can we bridge a gap that seems to be almost amazing. Well, I mean, it's very broad to think about that, but I guess I want to put it this way. What do you think, Darrell? What do you think, George, is the most important problem facing us right now? Would it be nuclear weapons? Would it be biological, chemical, or would it be something else entirely? I'm curious to hear your response.
Well, George, if I may, I'd like to address, John, the conversation you had most recently with Mrs. LaRouche. The deal breaker for me, even though I respect Lyndon LaRouche and consider him one of the most important public intellectuals in the English language in our time, Lyndon LaRouche, the deal breaker for me, and the reason I couldn't support the LaRouche organization, is that Lyndon LaRouche was an ardent supporter and propagandist for so-called Star Wars. That's what that was his big bag, and so this weighted emphasis on the imminent prospects of nuclear war comes from that perspective that only if we had had Star Wars in place or put something in place like it, then we could avert catastrophe, right? So that's where they're coming from. That's one of the more significant objections. I have some secondary and more trivial reasons for not supporting the LaRouche organization, but their overwhelming propaganda. This is Lyndon LaRouche, propagandistic support of the Star Wars system. Totally turned me off to it. And I agree with you. It's really what we're facing right now. It's bio warfare turned against us, the American people.
Yeah, I think the race ended in the early 80s. They were really working on this neutron bomb, and this would leave all the buildings in place but kill all the people. But the problem, even with that, is there was people in Europe that said, "Hey, I live here at the Erasmus Lab in Rotterdam here. I want to get rid of everybody else around me, but I want to have still the Erasmus Lab. I want to keep all the people to smoke the ferrets and keep my experiments going, right? I want selectivity, right? So the neutron bomb kind of was the last gasp for the high frontier, I think, for nuclear. And since about the Carter going into Reagan, all the effort has been bioweapon. And we really saw that kick up with David Petraeus. He's sort of the Richard Bissell of our time in 2011. Yeah. DARPA got into it really big time with a platform called ADEPT, ADEPT, and then the Triple P. We've heard about the Triple P to pay for businesses and Triple P for protective gear, but there was also a Triple P that DARPA worked on, which was their whole, hey, let's really start doing this Operation Lockdown. Let's operationalize this thing and launch this thing. And so they started doing the testing at these U.S. Army bases and then started testing with partners around the world. So there you go. There's your Triple P. That's the Triple P that Task Force talked about. And if you go back even further, DARPA's going to be you heard Joe Biden last night saying that NIH needs a DARPA. NIH needs a DARPA. What he's really saying is we need a weaponized, separate bioweapons place where we can have autonomy and no oversight, because DARPA has no oversight. But we already really do kind of have it with BARDA. It's an organization called BARDA. There's still a little bit of oversight. So Joe Biden's up there yesterday talking about, no, we need a DARPA for NIH, for Fauci. Fauci needs a DARPA. That's not a good idea. But it's the idea that elites really think is a great idea.
Yeah, the LaRouche, getting back to them, I think it's a serious flaw in their platform. The LaRouche organization is fighting the last World War. It's locked in the past. They're thinking kinetic. and we're into genetic, we're into biologicals. That's the new warfare. It's IT, it's DARPA type stuff. This is why you see guys who look like they're video game players, like Venoman up there, and not the true warriors, John, that you were alluding to previously, right? The real soldier type people. Socially,
Right.
you think people like Petraeus and people look like game heads up there, and of course the rank and files are going out. They're all going to be replaced by AI and robotics. So this talk of Star Wars and nuclear war, it's not targeted, it's not selective enough. Whereas genetic warfare, you could, they're already developed. There are race-specific bioweapons. You have a certain haplotype, you're going to be vulnerable to it. And the proof of concept was the AIDS crisis during the 1980s. And so that's my critique. It's a serious error. It's not just a doctrinal error. It's an existential error that the LaRouche organization is going to have to do a lot of splaining to do, as Desi Arnaz might say.
Well, I'm hopeful that we can help with that. It's certainly a large and extensive and well-known organization, and I think their heart's in the right place, even if they might be focusing in some place that I'm tempted to just say I agree with both of you. On the other hand, I think that they're extremely knowledgeable about the history of our struggle against these established elites that run these secret societies and run our country from behind closed doors. That there's so much valuable there, and I think they have a tremendous foundation. Lyndon LaRouche was imprisoned by Robert Mueller and those people, and it's Mike Billington the same. I mean, he was in prison for 11 years. Just because of his association with LaRouche at a time when Mueller and his backers were out to get LaRouche. So 11 years in prison, Mike Billington spent. So I think that I absolutely respect their dedication, and I'd like to bring them into focus with what George has been working on, in the sense of why should we not try to rise above past differences or misunderstandings? And it's such a crucial time. So I'm going to be devoting a good bit of time to trying to ask them these questions. Why are you not looking at, like, I looked through their executive intelligence review. I told George this before the show. I put in the search engine. I put in the word Fort Detrick in the search engine, and they have got at least a dozen or more articles about Fort Detrick, and with some really juicy stuff, but it's all from the 80s. It's been written, all that stuff was written in the 80s. So
they're
I think
fighting the last war. They're locked into the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as Star Wars.
I would argue with you there. I don't think that they're trying to make that happen anymore. But
they're not going by that term. But you're saying that they're warning of us imminent nuclear war exchanges. So, the absent presence is this whole previous backing of these anti-nuclear warhead systems, so-called SDI. Now, where I do agree with them is their cultural and historical critique coming from Anton Chaikin and people like Webster Tarpley. I think he left the organization. That stuff is spot on. I mean, you could verify from other sources, but I don't know where Lyndon LaRouche Jr. got the level of expertise necessary to go about lobbying Congress for a complex weapon system. And I can only think about George Webb's admonitions about how these crises are manufactured in order to transfer pile of money X over to party Y. And I think the SDI was one of those programs.
Well, if it was, it didn't work.
No.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm sorry, there's gale force winds developing here. But interestingly enough, I had a chance to talk to somebody who had been at the Sandia lab where they were working on the operative mechanism for Star Wars called Smart Pebbles, and this is accelerating very small pebbles, is sort of like Monty Python, right? At extremely high speeds as a buckshot, like just accelerate a huge amount of pebbles, and it's like buckshot. It'll take out the opposing satellite. But he had said that they had repurposed it for tunneling. And if you used it for tunneling, you'd almost get this perfect glassy-like tunnels that would almost vitrify the rock as you tunneled. And you just have to wonder if Elon Musk and the tunnelers of the CIA repurposed this. If Star Wars was just a ruse, because they knew that there was other the pulse laser and all these other different types of innovations were going to be very important. If you want to steal the mineral wealth, you need a tunnel. If you want to steal the oil and gas wealth, you need a tunnel. If you want to put in weapons in covertly in a Gladio type program, you need a tunnel. Let's build a tunnel, and let's go ahead.
You could also build DUMBs, deep underground military bases.
There you go.
They're called DUMB, right? Like down in Antarctica, where John Kerry likes to go every once in a while.
Yeah.
Neue Schwabenland.
Schwabenland, yeah. Klaus Schwab, right? Everyone gives me, everyone's saying, you're covering up Klaus Schwab's dad. You're covering up Klaus Schwab's dad. And I'm not. I'm just not as familiar. I'm going to do the research. But apparently there was some paperclip aspect to his background, and I'll get there. I swear, I'm not covering it up. Okay.
I couldn't sort it out myself. I don't really know what the big deal is about Klaus Schwab's dad, but I find enough objectionable about Klaus Schwab himself. That's another good question that I want to talk to the Schiller people about. Of course, they're in Europe there where they've been watching these color revolutions from pretty much a lot closer than we are, which is one reason their attitude is different from ours. They're right a lot closer to Russia. I'd like to find out what they think about the color revolutions, the Soros, and talk more about. But we do agree on Ukraine. We absolutely, Harley Schlanger and you would be 100% in agreement on what's going wrong in Ukraine. So, I respect what you're saying, Darrell, but I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. At least.
Oh, neither am I. Yeah, I'm an avid reader of the EIR material and the books that have been published. They've been instrumental in my own education and understanding the New World Order. But the kinetic aspect of it, the defense part, that's where I say, sorry. No, I don't think a nuclear warfare dallying in that is not where I want to be.
The thing is, though, I hate to keep getting back to it, but it's not just them, okay? They're a spokesperson for a side of our population. It's really larger than I think larger than us. That most of our people in this country would agree with Mrs. LaRouche that yes, nuclear exchange is the most pressing problem we have. Maybe that's why I raised the issue, is because it's not that I want to change, her opinion so much as that I want to recognize that American people are there too. They would, if you asked, 100 people, I bet you 90 of them would say that the problem of nuclear war is the most imminent problem we're looking at. And maybe only 1 or 2% would agree with the three of us that it is actually bioweapons.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
in that sense, it's a diversion.
It's funny how we're in the middle of a nuclear winter, or a nucleus winter, if you want to say it from a cellular point of view, and people don't realize it. That's the beauty of biowarfare, is you don't realize you're under attack, that you're under lockdown. Hey, I know a guy who wrote a book by that title, Under Lockdown. But so just for the people who are saying I'm covering this up, I'm sorry, John. but it's Escher Weiss. His father worked for this Nazi company. They got the National Socialist Medal as being one of the kind of IG Farben type of thing. And that I know, but I want to go deeper. So give me a pass until next Thursday and I'll have more research. But yes, Escher Weiss, yes. They did win the Nazi medal for best defense contractor. And it is interesting how this guy is doing our Great Reset.
Well, yeah, he comes right out of central casting so far as evil entities are concerned. But he himself, of course, both of you know this, he masks a larger devious, faceless evil, Klaus Schwab. He's almost a distraction himself. And George, I don't blame you if you're, what good is it going to do us if we know that his father was, a paperclip guy? That's the problem I have with all this genealogical. There you go again. It's the funky monkey. Who is that?
No, this is Klaus. This is his outfit. Klaus the Klingon.
Klaus the Klingon. I thought it was Klaus the SV40 zoonotic spillover.
No, that's a different
proponent. Dog. But no, George, I think we can go, ad infinitum to trace the genealogies of people. But you know what? We're facing annihilation. This is no hype. So okay, you found out Klaus Schwab's father was a paperclip guy. BFD. That's what I say. What are we going to do to stay their hand? That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I think this idea going back to the Nazis, which was, how do we kill in place? Could we come up with something that would biodifferentiate? Even we have to worry about transportation costs here and a transportation network and disposal. Wouldn't it be better if we could kill in place and have their families take care of the bodies and everything, and we just inherit the wealth? And so you fast forward 50 to 75 years now, isn't that kind of where we are? That's kind of where we're at. We're self-censoring ourselves. We're censoring each other. We're ratting out each other.
Yeah.
We're dying at home now rather than at the death camp. And I see a very Schwabian world right now. There he is.
That's the
Oh my God, he's a Klingon.
Exactly. Klaus the Klingon.
Oh my God.
And we're supposed to like it, and we're supposed to be impressed with how smart he is. Now, Escher Weiss is interesting because there was this group of Alan Dulles funded companies that were the old Nazi IG Farben types that ended up going worldwide, like Monsanto and so forth, and ended up having all these international affiliates that they placed a lot of the paperclip people, and I would definitely follow that up. But you look at CERN in Geneva, you look at Gavi, which is Bill Gates's virus thing in Geneva. It is kind of this Schwab's little black lab, that he can tinker with this Nazi ideal of killing in place, selectively killing in place. And I think they actually wanted to do that before the death camps. The whole idea of putting them in Jews in ghettos was, hey, we could fumigate the ghetto.
George, the operative word was hygiene in English, hygiene. Just like they're creating a hygienic utopia right now, right? Cleanse everything. So that was baked into post-kinetic type warfare, because they knew a certain segment were going to survive World War II, right? Somewhere, whether it's Argentina or the U.S. or in Germany or France or the Soviet Union. But yeah, they were looking past the kinetic into the genetic and the magnetic, right? Anti-gravitational. So we are still fighting in our heads. We're still fighting the past war. We have to get into their headspace and find out what's going on in there, and then come back and report. But we're fighting the last war.
Right. That's why I love calling out exactly what the genetic modifications are to the spike protein. and saying, oh my, they did that with MERS in 2011. And gee whiz, look at this. They did the same thing again in 2019. So those are the kind of embarrassing little facts that
George Hodel was doing this as early as 1946 under the banner of the United Nations, the so-called Black Dahlia killer. He was doing that. He was using Chinese test subjects, and then that model was brought back to the U.S. and it was covered up under these guise of these serial killings, right? Because that takes just like the Nazis, they're very sexy. So are serial killers, very sexy. And so we focus on, Klaus Schwab or whoever, or George Hodel, because he's a serial killer. And at the same time, what's happening? Not the Schwabs, but the Swabs are killing us, right? Right up your nasal passage. How beautiful. What a great military model is that?
They've thought about this a long time, and I definitely think this occupies 99.9% of Klaus Schwab's free time and his work day. And the way to beat this is to draw out the similarities that show that this is a bioweapon. It's not something that just happened because we built a road near some civet hutch, out in the middle of, and, blame it on those industrialists for wanting to build a hut. This is a passaged, repeat, or rinse and repeat hundreds of times until we get the transmissibility that we want and the effectiveness, the efficacy that we want, and that's what makes a bioweapon. So that's my last word on it, probably before I get blown off this stage here.
Well, one other thing I want to get from you, George, before we let you go, and that is you once again have gotten a termination from YouTube from your latest channel. So everybody's going to be concerned about, have you lost anything and where we're going to find George Webb. Please take a minute and reassure everybody that you've got everything together and where they can make sure that they can always find George Webb.
Yeah, it's great having Neighborhood News behind me. Andy Dabala has done a fantastic job of backing everything up. He's also made all of our episodes into podcasts that you can go to Nancy Hour, HOUR.com, and you can download those. You can play those back at 1.5 speed if you don't like the cadence of my voice. And then Andy also did the whack-a-mole thing where we would broadcast to 10 different sources at once. So even if YouTube does take us down, we're ready to go on other platforms. So we also have all the stuff backed up. We also have planned a new channel already, Neighborhood News Studio. We did our first broadcast today, and we'll be uploading. He's going to YouTube. We're also on Rumble, I believe. So there's you can't kill truth, no matter how Schwabby you are, no matter how many swabs you use. We're not going down with the swab, and we're not going down with the Schwab. We're gonna stay in this battle to the very end, and we're gonna win this thing, because quite frankly, people who are positive and good people emanate a huge amount of energy and cooperation and togetherness and power and energy. These guys who sit in the lab and tinker and are always thinking about how to kill the world, they don't engender that kind of energy. And that's what's going to win for us. I was called the Cherokee American David Icke. Dr. Hamamoto was called the Japanese American David Icke.
I'll take it.
Say what you will about David Icke. I actually think Dick Cheney does look like a reptile. I think Donald Rumsfeld does look like a reptile, and he acts like one too. But the power and the energy and the optimism of reaching out to people all over the world, even somebody like an Alice Walker who writes The Color Purple, her favorite author, David Icke. So I think we have to look to people who are radiating energy, that are positive, that have the work ethic, that are smart. And that's how we're going to win. We have to put our bets on the people who really want to win.
Absolutely. And on an individual basis, ladies and gentlemen, let me recommend a piece of software. You can set it with the URL, put it in this software so that as soon as this show goes live, it'll automatically download so you can help us back it up. It's called Media Human YouTube Downloader. I think it costs $20. That's what I do. I got it set to John's show. I got it set to George. I have, my show. So I don't even have to think about it. All my favorite shows, they automatically get downloaded, and I have an MP4 that only a neutron bomb will be able to take out.
That's great. Thank you so much, Darrell. And we do have the privilege of lots and lots of people around that can be doing this at the same time too. Media Human YouTube Downloader. Okay, looks like a good product. I should probably get that myself. Don't you think, Andy?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it's just about it's 9:01, guys, and boy, I got more I would like to talk to you, but hopefully you'll come back next week and we can continue this very interesting discussion. I'll have a lot more to report back to you from more of my talks with the folks over at LaRouche, and I'm going to work hard to try to bring us together. These two very important groups of people that have some little communication barrier, but as we were saying last night or yesterday, there has to be a way that humans can think beyond any type of a conflict. The human being is smart enough to avoid conflict as long as there's a will to do it, and so that's where I'm going to be aiming, is to try to let's find a way that we can avoid these conflicts, whether it's with Russia or whether with our friends on the other side of a political issue. We're smarter than that, we humans.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, Darrell.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay,
and thank you, Andy.
Gentlemen.
We'll talk to you again soon. And tomorrow night I'll be back here with Diane Sayre. See you then.
Great.